Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping back into a world of power, infirmity, and the quiet despair of a dying king. We're going to experience the final year of King Henry VIII, not from the grand halls of power, but from the intimate, often agonizing, perspective of his personal physician. You are that physician. You are Master Dr. William Butts, and the weight of England's health, embodied in its colossal monarch, rests heavily on your shoulders. Before we begin our journey into this intensely personal and historically critical period, if you find solace and fascination in these deep dives into the past, please take a moment to like this video, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from tonight. Now, dim the lights, settle into your most comfortable spot, and allow yourself to relax. Let the gentle hum of the past wash over you as we prepare to witness, as closely as you possibly can, the king's last breath. A physician's account of Henry VIII's final year. You wake to the persistent, insistent tolling of a distant bell. It's not the joyous peal of a Sunday morning, but the measured, heavy clang of a clock striking an hour in the deepest part of the night. Your eyes, though still closed, feel gritty and strained. Your body, accustomed to the peculiar rhythms of the royal court, feels an echoing weariness that no amount of sleep seems to fully alleviate. The air in your chambers at Hampton Court Palace is thick, carrying the faint, lingering scent of beeswax and the cooler, damp breath of the winter night seeping through the elaborate tapestry that covers the window. It is late January of the year 1546. The year stretches before you, an unknown expanse, but within its bounds, you know, lies a growing shadow that hangs over England's corpulent king. You sigh, a shallow, tired sound that barely stirs the quiet air. The rough wool blanket feels heavy, scratchy against your skin, and the goose feather mattress, though undoubtedly luxurious by any common measure, offers little true comfort to your perpetually tense frame. The bell tolls again, a final, resonant thud that vibrates through the very stone of the palace. You count the slow, deliberate strokes in your mind. 4. It is 4 in the morning. Far too early for a man of your years and station to be roused, unless the king needed you. Your heart gives a familiar, unpleasant lurch in your chest. It's a sensation you've grown accustomed to over these past few years, a tightening in your stomach that accompanies every summons, every late-night cough, every hushed whisper from the king's privy chamber. Henry's health, once robust and fearsome, has become a fragile, unpredictable thing, a constant source of anxiety that gnaws at the edges of your waking thoughts and invades your fitful dreams. You lie still for a moment longer, listening. The palace is mostly quiet, save for the faint creak of distant timbers, the rustle of a mouse in the wainscoting, and the steady, shallow rhythm of your own breathing. No frantic knocking at your door. No urgent cries for Master Butts. Not yet, at least. A temporary reprieve. Slowly, carefully, you swing your legs over the side of the bed. Your bare feet meet the cold, polished oak floor with a soft thud. A shiver runs through you, a deep chill that seems to settle in your bones. You reach for your dressing gown, a heavy velvet garment that offers little warmth against the pervasive dampness of the English winter. The fabric feels cool and smooth beneath your fingers. You wrap it tightly around you, the familiar weight a small comfort. You walk towards the small, unlit brazier in the corner of your room. You poke at the embers, stirring them into a faint, orange glow, then carefully add a few small pieces of kindling and a chunk of peat. The smoke, thick and earthy, momentarily stings your eyes. You fan the nascent flames gently with your hand, coaxing them to life. A faint warmth begins to emanate from the brazier, a precious commodity in the vast, draughty palace. As the fire slowly takes hold, you turn your thoughts to the king. Henry, now in his 55th year, is a shadow of the athletic, vibrant monarch you once knew. His immense frame, once a testament to his strength, is now bloated and diseased. His legs, particularly, are a source of constant, excruciating pain. The ulcerated sores, those suppurating wounds on his shins, have been a torment for years, resisting all your salves, all your poultices, all your carefully concocted remedies. They weep pus and blood, emitting a foul, sickly sweet odor that permeates his royal chambers, a smell you've come to associate intimately with the king's suffering. You close your eyes for a moment, picturing him. His face, once handsome and commanding, is now puffy and pale, often contorted in a grimace of pain, or flushed with fever. His eyes, though still sharp and intelligent, often betray a deep, weary sadness, a frustration born of his physical decay. The vibrant red beard that once defined his powerful image is now flecked with gray, often sticky with the medicines you administer or stained by his own copious sweating. The fire in the brazier flickers, casting dancing shadows on the walls. You sit on a small wooden stool beside it, warming your hands over the faint heat. You think of the day to come. Your duties are manifold. To assess the king's humours, to observe the state of his urine, to feel the pulse in his wrist, to examine the vile wounds on his legs. You must prepare his morning draughts, supervise his diet, and, perhaps most importantly, offer counsel and comfort when his spirits are low, as they so often are now. You recall the king's mood swings, which have become increasingly violent and unpredictable. The pain, combined with the frustration of his immobility and the ever-present threat of his own mortality, makes him prone to fits of rage. A misplaced cushion, a spilled cup, a perceived slight from a courtier, any triviality can ignite his fury. His voice, once a booming declaration of authority, can quickly become a guttural roar, shaking the very rafters. You've learned to tread carefully around him, choosing your words with precision, your movements with utmost caution. Fear, a cold, constant companion, lives not far from you when you are in his presence. The morning light, a faint, watery gray, begins to seep through the tapestry, painting the edges of the window with a soft glow. You rise, stretching your stiff back. You move to your small writing desk, cluttered with vials, pestle and mortar, and various medical texts. You uncork a bottle of distilled spirits, its sharp, clean scent momentarily cutting through the stale air. You dip a clean linen rag into it, then carefully wipe down your surgical instruments. A small, sharp lancet, a probing needle, a pair of blunt-nosed forceps. Even the thought of their use sends a faint shudder through you. These instruments, designed to bring relief, often bring more pain before any comfort can be found. You prepare a simple concoction for yourself, a calming herbal infusion to settle your own stomach before the demands of the day begin. The warm liquid is a welcome comfort, sliding down your throat, leaving a faint taste of chamomile and mint. You know you must be alert, your mind clear, for the king deserves nothing less than your absolute focus. As the palace slowly begins to stir, the distant sounds of servants moving about, the faint clatter of pots from the kitchens, begin to filter into your chambers. You hear the distant bray of a mule, the sharp, authoritative voice of a guard. The world outside your quiet contemplation is waking, and with it, your duties beckon. You dress carefully, methodically. Your dark, conservative physician's robes, made of fine wool, feel heavy on your shoulders. You secure your leather belt, from which hangs a small pouch containing your most essential tools and a small notebook where you meticulously record the king's symptoms, the treatments administered, and his reactions. Every detail is crucial, every observation a potential key to understanding the slow, relentless decay of his mighty frame. You pick up a small, sealed phial of a potent pain-relieving tincture, a blend of opium and various herbs. This is a last resort, to be used only when the king's pain becomes truly unbearable, for you know its dangers, its addictive nature. Yet, the sight of the king's agony often drives you to it, the desire for his momentary peace outweighing the future consequences. You step out of your chambers into the dimly lit corridor. The air here is colder, a damp chill that seems to cling to the ancient stone walls. The tapestries hanging along the corridor, depicting hunting scenes and mythical beasts, seem to absorb the meager light, making the passage feel even darker. Your footsteps, softened by your thick-soled shoes, make little sound on the cold flagstones. You pass closed doors, imagining the sleeping occupants within, courtiers, ladies in waiting, servants, all bound to the king's orbit, though few bear the direct burden that you do. The guard at the king's antechamber acknowledges you with a slight nod, his face impassive in the flickering torchlight. He knows your purpose, your constant presence near the monarch. He opens the heavy oak door for you, its ancient hinges groaning softly. You step into the king's outer chambers, a vast, opulent space. Even at this early hour, a few trusted gentlemen of the privy chamber are already present, huddled quietly, their faces grave in the dim light, speaking in hushed tones. They look up as you enter, their expressions a mixture of weariness and unspoken concern. You offer a small, polite nod, acknowledging their presence. The air here is warmer, but thick, heavy with the lingering scent of unwashed bodies, stale wine, and the unmistakable, pervasive odor that follows the king. The smell of his wounds, a sickly sweet, putrid aroma that has become a constant in this part of the palace. You've long since become accustomed to it, but it's a smell that still catches at the back of your throat, a grim reminder of the task that awaits you. You move towards the door of the king's privy chamber, the inner sanctum. Another guard stands sentinel there, his face unreadable. He too acknowledges you with a subtle gesture, opening the door just wide enough for you to slip through. The chamber beyond is even warmer, almost stifling, and the smell is more potent now, a suffocating blanket. The king's bedchamber. It is a cavernous room, dominated by the massive, four-poster bed, draped in heavy velvet curtains. A low fire crackles in the great hearth, casting dancing shadows on the ornate ceiling. The air is still, heavy, and the only sound is the rhythmic, labored breathing of the king. You approach the bed slowly, your senses acutely aware. The curtains are partially drawn, shrouding the bed in a dim, sepulchral gloom. You can make out the immense outline of the king's body beneath the heavy blankets, a mountain of flesh that barely stirs. He is lying on his back, his head slightly elevated by a mound of pillows. You draw closer, your footsteps silent on the thick Persian rugs. You reach out a hand, carefully, and part the heavy velvet curtains. The dim light from the hearth illuminates the king's face. It is pale, slack in sleep, but even in repose, the lines of pain are etched deeply around his mouth and eyes. His breath comes in shallow, rattling gasps, a sound that always sends a chill down your spine. A faint sheen of sweat covers his brow, and his lower lip trembles slightly with each exhalation. You lean closer, listening to his breathing. It is shallower than you would like, punctuated by small, guttural sounds. You notice the slight tremor in his hands, even in sleep, a persistent nervous energy that never fully dissipates. You reach for his wrist, your fingers gently seeking the pulse. It is weak, thready, but present. Too rapid, perhaps, a common symptom of the fever that constantly waxes and wanes within him. You hold it for a full minute, counting the beats, your brow furrowed in concentration. You note the rate, the strength, the regularity, or lack thereof, in your mind. You gently place your hand on his forehead. It is warm, clammy to the touch, a low-grade fever that stubbornly clings to him. The skin feels fragile, almost translucent, stretched taut over his immense frame. You allow your hand to linger for a moment, a silent assessment of his internal struggle. He stirs then, a low groan escaping his lips. His eyelids flutter, then slowly open. His eyes, bleary and bloodshot, fix on you. For a moment, there is a flicker of confusion, then recognition. "Butts," he rasps, his voice thick with sleep and the effort of speech. It is a familiar sound, a tired acknowledgement. "Your Majesty," you reply softly, your voice low and reassuring. "How fares your grace this morning?" He closes his eyes again, a long, weary sigh escaping him. "Ill, Butts, ever ill. The leg, it burns like the fires of hell." You nod, your expression sympathetic. "I understand, Your Majesty. We shall tend to it directly." He shifts slightly, a groan of pain accompanying the movement. You can already smell the reek of the infection, stronger now that he is awake and the air stirs around him. It is a smell that has become as familiar as your own breath, a scent that signals not just his suffering, but the relentless advance of his various maladies. "The thirst," he whispers, his throat dry. "A cup of water, Butts." Quickly, you motion to one of the watchful chamberlains, who immediately brings a silver goblet of water. You take it, testing the temperature, cool, but not icy. You carefully lift the king's head, supporting the immense weight with your arm. His skin feels hot against your hand, and you can feel the tremor that runs through his body. He drinks greedily, the water splashing slightly onto his beard. When he is finished, he sinks back onto the pillows with a sigh, his eyes still closed. "My draught, Butts," he murmurs. "The bitter one. Perhaps it will bring some ease." You turn to the chamberlain again, who has already retrieved the small, intricately decorated bottle from a bedside table. You pour a measured amount into a small silver spoon, its contents a thick, dark liquid, smelling faintly of herbs and something else, something cloyingly sweet that you know masks a more potent bitterness. You gently tilt the spoon to his lips. He swallows with a grimace, his eyes still closed, a faint shiver passing through him. This draught is designed to settle his stomach, to aid his digestion, but it often brings him little true relief. You begin the daily ritual of examining his legs. With the help of the chamberlains, you carefully pull back the heavy blankets and the fine linen sheets. The sight is grim, as always. The king's right leg is monstrously swollen, twice the size of his left, covered in angry red skin, pitted and scarred from years of untreated ulcers. The primary ulcer, a gaping, festering wound on his shin, is the worst. It weeps a thick, yellowish pus, staining the bandages beneath it. The air around it is heavy with the putrid stench of decaying flesh and infection. You carefully unbind the old bandages. The linen is stiff with dried blood and pus, and as you peel it away, the king groans, a low, guttural sound of agony. You work slowly, gently, trying to minimize his pain, but it is impossible to avoid entirely. The exposed wound is a truly horrific sight. A deep, angry cavity, its edges red and inflamed, the surrounding flesh swollen and tender to the touch. You probe it gently with a clean, sterilized probe, assessing the depth, the extent of the infection. The king clenches his teeth, his knuckles white against the bedclothes. "It is foul, butts," he hisses, his voice strained. "Cleanse it." "Aye, your majesty," you reply, your voice calm and steady, despite the grim reality before you. "We shall do our utmost." You call for warm water and clean linens. A chamberlain brings a basin of steaming water, and another prepares fresh bandages. You carefully wash the wound, the warm water sluicing away the pus and blood. The king gasps, his body tensing with the pain. You work with practiced efficiency, your hands steady, your mind focused on the task. You use a clean sponge to gently dab away the debris, inspecting every inch of the angry flesh. The stench, momentarily intensified by the warmth of the water, is almost overwhelming. You try not to react, to maintain your composure, for the king watches your every move. Once the wound is as clean as you can make it, you begin to apply your latest poultice. This one, a thick, green paste, is made from a concoction of herbs: plantain, comfrey, marigold, all known for their healing properties, mixed with honey for its antiseptic qualities, and a touch of opium poppy to dull the pain. The smell of the herbs is sharp, earthy, a temporary respite from the putrid odor. You spread the poultice thickly over the gaping wound, pressing it gently into the raw flesh. The king shudders, a deep, full-body tremor. "It burns, butts," he mutters, though the burning is a sign, you hope, that the medicine is working, drawing out the corruption. "It is drawing out the humours, your majesty," you reassure him, though you know this is a small comfort to his suffering. You then carefully re-bandage the leg, wrapping it tightly with fresh linen strips. The process is slow, meticulous, designed to protect the wound and keep the poultice in place. Once finished, you gently lay his leg back down, pulling the blankets back over him. The king closes his eyes, a profound exhaustion settling over his features. The pain, it never ceases, butts. "We strive for ease, your majesty," you reply, your voice soft. "Patience and prayer, and the remedies God provides." You spend some time discussing his diet for the day. You advise him to eat sparingly of heavy meats, recommending instead broths, light gruels, and cooked fruits to aid his digestion, which is often sluggish. He grumbles, as he always does, about the blandness of his physician-approved meals, longing for the roast meats and rich pastries he once consumed with gusto. But he acquiesces, for he knows, perhaps better than anyone, the precariousness of his own health. As the morning progresses, more courtiers begin to arrive, filtering into the outer chamber, waiting for the king's formal reception, his levee. You remain by his bedside, observing him, making notes in your small book. You watch his breathing, the color of his face, the subtle shifts in his expression. You listen to his pronouncements, his complaints, his moments of surprising clarity amidst the pain-induced haze. His temper, as predicted, begins to fray with the light of day. A page, clumsy with a chamber pot, spills a few drops onto the floor. The king's eyes snap open, blazing with sudden fury. "You blithering idiot!" he roars, his voice surprisingly strong for a man in such pain. "Are you blind? Clean that filth at once, or I'll have your hide flayed." The young page scrambles, his face pale with terror, quickly wiping the offending drops. You watch impassively, a silent witness to the king's volatile nature. Later, a delegation from the Privy Council arrives, bringing documents for the king's signature. He struggles to sit upright, leaning heavily against the pillows, his face grimacing with effort. His hand, once firm and steady, now trembles as he grips the quill. He signs the documents with a flourish, his signature, Henry R., still bold and recognizable, but the effort clearly exhausts him. You observe the sheen of sweat on his brow, the shallow, rapid breaths. He dismisses them quickly, his patience worn thin. The day wears on in this manner. You administer another of his daily draughts, a bitter mixture designed to purge his humours, to cleanse his system. He gags slightly as he swallows it, his face contorted in a grimace. You note his reaction, the slight tremor in his hands, the faint paleness of his lips. You change his dressings again in the afternoon, the stench of the wound as potent as ever, a constant reminder of the relentless infection that gnaws at his flesh. The process is agonizing for him, and for you, a quiet testament to his enduring pain. You spend a quiet moment observing his right leg. The swelling persists, a monstrous deformity. The skin around the main ulcer is red and angry, and you notice a few smaller, inflamed pustules beginning to form nearby. This secondary infection, erysipelas, has been a recurring torment, spreading its fiery redness across his skin. You sigh inwardly. It is a battle you have fought countless times, with limited success. The king's constitution, once so robust, now seems perpetually engaged in a losing war against itself. You discuss the day's events with him, the reports from Parliament, the latest news from France. He listens intently, his mind still sharp despite his physical decline. He offers shrewd observations, sharp criticisms, revealing the keen intellect that still resides within his ailing body. But his attention span is shorter now, his patience easily exhausted. He often breaks off mid-sentence, distracted by a sudden jolt of pain, or simply succumbing to a wave of profound fatigue. As evening approaches, the king's pain seems to intensify. He grumbles, shifts restlessly in his bed, his face drawn and pale. He calls for his lute, then dismisses it, unable to focus. He asks for a game of chess, then throws the pieces across the room in a fit of frustration. You watch him, a silent sentinel, ever ready to offer comfort or administer remedies. You prepare his evening draught, a slightly different mixture, designed to aid sleep. It contains a small amount of opium, just enough to dull the edges of his pain and quiet his restless mind, but not enough to render him completely insensible. You hold the spoon to his lips. He swallows it without complaint this time, his desperation for relief evident in his weary eyes. You remain by his bedside for a long time, watching him as the potion slowly takes effect. His breathing becomes deeper, more regular, though still punctuated by a soft, rattling sound. The lines of pain on his face begin to soften, his muscles relax. You observe the way his chest rises and falls, the slight tremor that still runs through his hands even in the depths of his slumber. You listen to the quiet crackle of the fire in the hearth, the distant sounds of the palace settling down for the night. Finally, you see him drift into a deeper sleep, his large body a still, silent presence beneath the heavy blankets. It is a precarious peace, you know, easily shattered by a sudden jolt of pain, a fit of coughing, or the rising fever. But for now, he sleeps. You gather your instruments, wipe them clean, and place them carefully back in your pouch. You record your final observations for the day in your notebook. King sleeps, albeit restless. Pain severe. Leg wounds festering. Fever persists. Each entry is a testament to the slow, relentless erosion of a once powerful man. You exit the king's privy chamber, nodding to the weary guard, who has also been on duty for hours. The outer chamber is quiet now, the courtiers having retired for the night. You walk back through the dimly lit corridors, your footsteps echoing faintly on the cold flagstones. The palace, vast and imposing during the day, feels even larger, more silent, in the dead of night. You reach your own chambers, the faint warmth from the brazier a welcome sensation. You replenish the peat, ensuring the fire will last through the remaining hours of darkness. You undress slowly, each movement deliberate, your body aching with fatigue. You pull on your nightshirt, a simple linen garment, and slide into bed. The straw mattress rustles beneath you, and the scratchy wool blanket offers little comfort against the pervasive chill. You close your eyes, but sleep does not come easily. Your mind replays the day's events. The sight of the king's suppurating wounds, the sound of his pained groans, the flash of his terrible temper, the quiet desperation in his eyes. You feel the weight of your responsibility, the immense burden of attending to a monarch whose body is slowly, irrevocably failing. You think of the future. How long can he endure this constant suffering? How much longer can his enormous frame withstand the ravages of disease and infection? The question hangs heavy in the air, unanswered, unsettling. You know that England's future, its religious and political stability, rests on the frail, diseased body of this one man. And you, Master Dr. William Butts, are charged with keeping him alive, day by agonizing day. The responsibility is immense, the burden almost unbearable. You drift into a fitful, shallow sleep, haunted by the images of the day, by the smell of decay, by the sound of the king's labored breath. The darkness of your chambers is absolute, a thick, velvety blanket that presses down on you, amplifying every sound, every sensation. You are accustomed to this nocturnal quiet, a brief respite from the endless demands of the court, but tonight, it feels particularly heavy, pregnant with unspoken anxieties. You shift on your straw mattress, the rustling a dry whisper in the stillness. Your muscles ache, a dull throb in your lower back and shoulders, a testament to the long hours spent stooping over the king's immense form, examining his wounds, administering his medicines. Your mind, despite your body's profound weariness, refuses to quiet. You replay the day's events, dissecting each symptom, each observation. The king's pulse was too rapid, the fever stubbornly persistent. The ulcer on his shin, that monstrous, weeping sore, seemed angrier today, its edges more inflamed, the pus thicker, more yellowish. You tried a new application of the plantain and comfrey poultice, hoping to draw out more of the corruption, but the pain it caused him was considerable. You recall the grimace on his face, the tight clenching of his jaw, the low, guttural groans that escaped him. You consider the various remedies, the ancient texts, the recent treatises from continental Europe that you pore over in your limited free hours. So many concoctions, so many theories of humours and their imbalances, yet none seem to offer more than fleeting, partial relief to the king's enduring torment. The medical knowledge of your age, advanced as it might be in certain aspects, often feels woefully inadequate in the face of such relentless, systemic decay. His constitution, once so formidable, is now a crumbling fortress, each new malady breaching its weakening defenses. You think of the stench. It is a constant, clinging presence in his chambers, a mixture of stale sweat, the cloying sweetness of decaying flesh, and the acrid tang of various poultices and salves. You've become desensitized to it over time, but sometimes, in the quiet of the night, when your senses are unburdened by the immediate tasks, the smell seems to reappear. A phantom presence that lingers in your nostrils, a visceral reminder of the king's ailing body. It is the scent of a slow, inexorable decline. The palace outside your window is utterly still now, a vast, sleeping behemoth. You hear the distant, muffled barking of a dog, perhaps a guard dog in the courtyards, or a stray from the nearby village. The sound is forlorn, echoing in the quiet night. You imagine the cold, damp stone of the Tower of London, a place where many of Henry's former associates, his enemies, and even his wives, have met their end. A shiver, unrelated to the chill of the room, passes through you. The king's power, absolute and terrifying, is capable of extinguishing lives as easily as a candle flame. You turn on your side, pulling the coarse wool blanket higher, trying to find a position that alleviates the pervasive ache in your limbs. Your hip, pressed against the firm mattress, feels bruised. Your feet, despite their coverings, feel perpetually cold. You try to clear your mind, to find some measure of peace, but the images of the day persist. The king's bloated face, pale in the dim light of his chamber. The raw, weeping wound on his shin. The flash of fury in his eyes when a servant made a mistake. The weariness, the profound exhaustion that seems to cling to him like a shroud. You ponder the burden of your position. You are not merely a physician. You are a confidant, a keeper of secrets, a silent witness to the most intimate aspects of the king's suffering. You hear his complaints, his fears, his moments of vulnerability, moments he would never dare reveal to his courtiers or his council. He trusts you with his very life, and that trust is a heavy weight, a constant pressure that never truly lessens. You feel the immense responsibility, the historical significance of every decision you make, every draft you administer. The fate of England, in a very real sense, rests upon your medical acumen and your unwavering dedication. The early hours of the morning are always the hardest. The cold deepens, the darkness feels more absolute, and the mind, left to its own devices, begins to spiral into anxieties and melancholic reflections. You think of your own family, briefly, a fleeting image of your wife and children in your own home, far from the suffocating grandeur of the court. A warmth, a brief flicker of tenderness, passes through you, quickly replaced by the cold reality of your duty. You are bound to the king, tied to his failing health, your life inextricably linked to his until his very last breath. You hear the faint, distant sounds of the palace beginning to stir again. The slow creak of floorboards in a distant corridor. The muffled cough of a servant. The occasional clatter of something dropped in the kitchens below. The promise of dawn, though still hours away, is beginning to make its presence felt. You close your eyes again, trying to snatch a few more moments of shallow sleep before the inevitable summons. You know the routine. The bell will toll again, the guards will stir, and soon, a page will arrive at your door, bearing the king's wishes. The day, identical to the one before, yet always subtly different, always holding the potential for a sudden crisis, will begin anew. You drift into a shallow, fitful doze, your dreams a chaotic tapestry of anatomical diagrams, weeping wounds, and the king's booming, pained voice. You are roused, not by a bell this time, but by the insistent, rapid rapping at your chamber door. It is still dark, but the knock is urgent, unmistakable. Your heart leaps, a sudden, jarring beat against your ribs. This is it, the summons. Master Butts. A young voice calls, muffled through the heavy oak. The king commands your presence. Quickly, you swing your legs out of bed, your movements stiff and clumsy in the darkness. The cold of the floor jolts you fully awake. You fumble for your dressing gown, pulling it on, tying the cord with trembling fingers. Your mind races, already assessing possibilities. What new crisis has arisen? A sudden fever? A worse agony in his leg? Or something else, something entirely unforeseen. You light a small candle from the embers of the brazier, its feeble flame casting flickering shadows that dance wildly on the walls. You grab your medical bag, already packed with your instruments, your files, your bandages. You check the pouch on your belt, ensuring the pain tincture is secure. You open the door. A young page stands there, his face pale and drawn in the dim light of the corridor, his eyes wide with urgency. Master Butts, His Majesty is in great distress. Lead the way, you instruct, your voice calm despite the tremor in your hands. You follow the page down the dimly lit corridors, your footsteps echoing on the stone. The palace is still largely asleep, but here and there, a torch flickers, illuminating a guard, a scurrying servant. The sense of urgency is palpable, a cold knot in your stomach. You reach the king's ante-chamber. The guards are more alert now, their faces grim. The gentlemen of the privy chamber are already gathered, not huddled quietly this time, but standing, their expressions etched with alarm. They look to you, their unspoken questions hanging heavy in the air. The door to the privy chamber is open, and a low, guttural moan, unmistakably the king's, issues forth. It is a sound of profound agony, a raw cry that sends a shiver down your spine. You hurry through the doorway. The chamber is warmer than usual, almost stifling, and the smell of the king's sickness is overpowering, thick and heavy in the air. The fire in the hearth roars, throwing dancing light onto the heavy velvet drapes of the bed. You rush to the bedside, parting the curtains with a hurried hand. The sight that greets you makes your blood run cold. The king is thrashing, his immense body convulsing on the bed. His face is contorted in a mask of unimaginable pain, his eyes wide and bloodshot, rolling wildly in their sockets. A thick, yellowish froth bubbles at the corners of his mouth. His breathing is shallow, ragged gasps, punctuated by choking sounds. His hands are clawing at the bedclothes, tearing at the sheets. A chamberlain is trying to hold him down, but the king's strength, even in his agony, is immense. His Majesty, the chamberlain cries, his voice strained with effort. He awoke with a great scream, Master Butts. He clutches his chest. You act quickly, your physician's instincts overriding the shock. You push the chamberlain aside, leaning over the king. Your Majesty, where is the pain? You ask, your voice firm, trying to cut through the haze of his agony. He groans, unable to form words, his hand pressing a clenched fist against his chest. His skin is clammy, covered in a cold sweat, yet his body is burning with fever. His pulse, when you find it, is a frantic, erratic flutter, racing like a trapped bird. This is not just the leg. This is something new, something far more terrifying. This is the heart, or perhaps, the lungs. You call for hot compresses, for a strong emetic. You need to clear his humours, to bring relief, to reduce the internal pressure that is clearly tormenting him. You work quickly, giving orders in sharp, precise tones. The chamberlains scramble to obey, their faces pale with fear. You force a strong emetic down his throat, a bitter, viscous liquid designed to induce vomiting, to purge his system. He gags, convulses, and then, with a terrible, wrenching sound, he vomits, a torrent of bile and undigested food. The stench is immediate and horrific, but you pay it no mind. You hold his head, wiping his mouth with a clean cloth. He groans again, but the thrashing seems to lessen slightly, a momentary abatement of the agony. The tincture, you command, your voice urgent. The strongest one, and prepare the bleeding bowl. You reach for the small phial of opium tincture, your hands steady despite the frantic beating of your own heart. This is it, the powerful sedative you keep for his most dire moments. You measure out a larger dose than usual, a calculated risk, but his pain is too great to ignore. You gently raise his head, and he swallows the bitter liquid, his eyes still wide and unfocused. While the tincture begins its slow work, you prepare to bleed him. It is an ancient practice, the drawing of blood to balance the humours, to release the ill vapors that plague the body. You sterilize your lancet over the flame of a candle, the metal glinting ominously. You instruct a chamberlain to hold his arm out, exposing the vein in his elbow. The king is still moaning, but his struggles are less violent now as the opium begins to take effect. You make a quick, precise incision with the lancet. A dark, thick stream of blood immediately begins to flow into the waiting silver bowl. You watch it intently, observing its color, its consistency. It is dark, sluggish, as you expected. You allow a good measure of blood to flow, perhaps a half pint, before you stem the flow with a clean cloth and bind the wound. The king's breathing seems to ease, a little less ragged, a little more shallow. The froth at his mouth subsides. He falls into a restless, drug-induced sleep, his body occasionally twitching. You remain by his side, your hand on his brow, feeling the lingering fever, the clammy sweat. You listen to his breathing, now a low, rattling sound, but without the desperate gasps of moments ago. The worst of the immediate crisis seems to have passed, but you know this is merely a temporary reprieve, a battle won, but the war still rages within his failing body. You spend the remainder of the pre-dawn hours by his bedside, a silent vigil. The chamberlains move quietly, cleaning the soiled linens, tending to the fire. The air, though still heavy, is less suffocating now. You watch the king, a colossal figure of power and frailty, battling the relentless tide of illness. You feel the profound exhaustion settling over you, but you dare not sleep, not while his life hangs so precariously. The weight of England, the future of the Tudor dynasty, rests upon your shoulders, upon your ability to navigate the treacherous currents of his failing health. You pray for strength, for guidance, for another dawn to break. As the first faint light of dawn, a pale, watery gray, began to filter through the heavy velvet curtains, you remained by the king's bedside, a silent sentinel. The immediate crisis had subsided, the opium having dragged him into a deeper, though still restless, sleep. His breathing, while still labored and punctuated by a persistent rattle, was no longer the frantic, desperate gasps that had gripped him earlier. The clammy sweat still coated his brow, but the fierce tremors that had racked his body had ceased. You gently placed your fingers on his wrist again, feeling for his pulse. It was still rapid, but less erratic, a thready, but steady beat beneath your fingertips. You observed the slight twitch of his eyelids, the occasional furrowing of his brow, even in sleep. The lines of pain, though softened by the opiate, were still etched deeply into his features. You felt the immense weight of your responsibility, a palpable burden in the quiet, dim chamber. Every decision, every dosage, every observation carried the potential for profound consequence. England itself, you knew, felt the tremor of its king's failing health. The chamberlains, now moving with a renewed sense of quiet purpose, began to stir the fire in the hearth, adding fresh logs. The crackle and hiss of the burning wood filled the silence, offering a small, comforting sound. The air, though still heavy with the lingering scent of sickness and the king's unwashed body, felt less suffocating now that the immediate horror of the vomiting had been dealt with. You allowed yourself a moment to stretch, a deep, silent movement that eased the ache in your back and shoulders. Your own stomach growled, a hollow, insistent demand. You had not eaten since the previous evening, and the stress of the early morning's crisis had drained you further. But hunger was a minor discomfort compared to the king's suffering, and you pushed it aside. Around 6 in the morning, a young page, moving with exceptional quietness, entered the privy chamber carrying a small, covered wooden tray. He placed it silently on a small table near the hearth. It held a simple breakfast for you: a piece of hard bread, a small wedge of cheese, and a cup of lukewarm, thin ale. You accepted it with a grateful nod, chewing slowly, deliberately, trying to gain some strength back into your weary frame. The food was bland, unappetizing, but it was sustenance, a necessary fuel for the long, arduous day ahead. As the palace fully woke, you began your formal daily examination of the king, even while he slept. You gently lifted his left leg, inspecting the skin. It was less swollen than the right, but still discolored, mottled with old scars and the purplish hue of poor circulation. You ran your hand along the calf, feeling the swollen veins beneath the skin, the faint warmth that indicated the persistent underlying inflammation. The unhealed ulcers on this leg, while smaller than the monstrous one on his right, were still angry, weeping sores that added to his constant discomfort. You made a mental note to redress them once he woke. Then, the right leg. Even under the blankets, the sheer size of it was alarming. You carefully, gently, pulled back the linen and gauze. The poultice from yesterday was still largely in place, but the bandages beneath were visibly stained with pus and serous fluid, a grim testament to the relentless discharge from the main ulcer. The stench, though familiar, still made your stomach lurch. You leaned closer, examining the angry red edges of the wound, the mottled, inflamed skin surrounding it. You could see fresh pockets of pus forming, small, angry pustules. The erysipelas, that fiery red rash, seemed to have spread slightly overnight, a persistent, aggressive foe. You sighed inwardly. It was a constant battle, trying to keep these wounds clean, trying to coax them towards healing, trying to prevent the ever-present threat of gangrene. You had tried every known remedy: poultices of lead and mercury, applications of wine and honey, washes of rosewater and vinegar, even cauterization on occasion, a truly agonizing procedure for the king. Yet, the wounds remained, a testament to his deeply corrupted humours and the insidious nature of the infection that had taken root years ago. You decided that the main ulcer needed to be thoroughly cleaned again, and a stronger drawing poultice applied. You instructed a chamberlain to prepare fresh, hot water and the necessary herbs from your medical chest. The herbs, potent, pungent, filled the chamber with their sharp, medicinal aroma, temporarily masking the foul scent of the wound. Around 7, the king stirred again, a slow, deep groan escaping his lips. His eyes fluttered open, still bleary, still heavy with the effects of the opium. He looked at you, his gaze slow to focus. "But," he rasped, his voice still thick, "the pain, it is not so fierce now. Thanks be to God, Your Majesty," you replied, your voice soft and reassuring. "The draught eased your torment. Now, if your grace permits, we must attend to your leg and refresh your humours." He nodded weakly, a slight inclination of his immense head. "Do what must be done, but gently, for God's sake, gently." You oversaw the removal of the old bandages. The sight of the ulcer was no less grim in the morning light. You carefully washed the wound again, the warm water carrying away the pus and blood, revealing the raw, inflamed flesh beneath. The king hissed through clenched teeth, his hands gripping the bedclothes. You worked slowly, methodically, talking to him in a low, soothing voice, explaining each step, reassuring him. You then prepared a new poultice, a potent mix designed to draw out the corruption. This time, you added a stronger proportion of a more caustic ingredient, perhaps a touch of verdigris, a copper-based compound known for its strong drawing properties, yet also its potential for irritation. It was a gamble, but the persistence of the infection demanded aggressive treatment. You spread the thick, dark paste over the entire wound, covering its angry surface. The king cried out, a sharp, sudden sound of pain. "It burns, Butts! It burns like fire," he roared, trying to pull his leg away. "Hold fast, Your Majesty," you commanded, gently but firmly. "It is working. It is drawing out the foulness. It will bring you ease, I swear it." You had to hold him still, with the assistance of a chamberlain, as the searing sensation took hold. You wrapped the leg quickly with fresh, sterile linen bandages, pulling them tight to keep the poultice in place. He continued to groan, his body trembling, even after the bandaging was complete. Once the dressings were secure, you poured him a cup of the morning's purgative draught, a bitter, dark concoction designed to induce bowel movements and further cleanse his system. He grimaced, but swallowed it, his eyes still watering from the pain in his leg. You then attended to his other leg, cleaning and dressing the smaller ulcers with a milder, soothing salve. His levee began soon after, the procession of courtiers and petitioners arriving to greet the king. You remained close by, observing him, monitoring his reactions. Despite his pain, Henry rallied, summoning his formidable will to project an image of strength and authority. He received foreign ambassadors, listened to petitions, and dictated letters, his voice, though weaker than in his youth, still carrying the undeniable timbre of command. But you could see the effort it cost him. The sheen of sweat on his brow, the shallow, rapid breaths, the slight tremor in his hands, all were signs of the immense toll his exertions took. He dismissed a particularly long-winded courtier with a sharp, impatient wave of his hand, his temper, though momentarily subdued by the opium, beginning to fray. "Enough! My head aches with your prattling. Leave me." The courtier bowed hastily, retreating with a pale face. You knew this was the pain talking, the frustration of a powerful man trapped within a failing body. Mid-morning, the king complained of a sharp, piercing headache, a common companion to his fevers. You prepared a compress soaked in rosewater and vinegar, placing it gently on his forehead. The cool, fragrant liquid offered some temporary relief, and he closed his eyes, leaning back against the pillows, allowing the brief respite. You continued to watch him, assessing the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the color of his complexion, the way his breath caught occasionally in his throat. You dictated your morning observations into your notebook, meticulously recording the nature of the ulcer's discharge, the king's reaction to the new poultice, the persistence of his fever, the character of his pulse. Every detail was crucial, every change a potential indicator of his trajectory. The day progressed with its relentless rhythm. You supervised his noon meal, a light broth and some boiled chicken, which he ate with little enthusiasm. He complained of indigestion, a dull ache in his stomach, another constant torment. You prescribed a digestive aid, a powder mixed with water, which he swallowed with a grimace. The afternoon brought more council meetings, more petitions, more endless discussions of state. The king, propped up in his bed or, on rare occasions, lowered carefully into his wheeled chair, received his ministers. He spoke of the war with France, the ongoing religious reforms, the succession. His mind remained remarkably keen, his grasp of policy firm, but his attention would wander, his eyes would grow heavy, and he would often abruptly dismiss his counselors, claiming fatigue or renewed pain. You knew it was the latter, the relentless, gnawing agony that consumed his thoughts. You checked his leg again in the late afternoon. The poultice, after several hours, had indeed drawn out a significant amount of putrid fluid. As you carefully removed the old dressings, the stench was intense, but the ulcer itself seemed marginally cleaner, less inflamed around its immediate edges. The surrounding erysipelas, however, persisted, a fiery red rash spreading across his swollen calf. You applied a fresh poultice, a slightly milder one this time, as the initial caustic application had done its work. The king still groaned, but less violently than in the morning. As evening approached, the king grew more restless, more irritable. The effects of the morning's opium had long since worn off, and the pain began to assert its full, agonizing dominion. He began to curse, to lash out at the chamberlains, at anyone who dared to approach him. He threw a cushion across the room, complaining of its stiffness. His voice, once weary, now vibrated with frustration and rage. "Butts!" he bellowed, his eyes blazing with fury and pain. "This leg, it torments me beyond endurance. Can you do nothing? Am I to suffer thus until my very last breath?" You approached him calmly, your face impassive. "Your Majesty, we strive constantly for your ease. The pain is a cruel master, but we have remedies. I will prepare your evening draught now, to bring you respite and the comfort of sleep." You prepared a stronger dose of the opium tincture, measuring it out precisely, a few more drops than the night before. You knew the risks, the slow weakening of his constitution, the increasing reliance on the narcotic. But the alternative, his unrelieved agony, was unthinkable. You held the spoon to his trembling lips. He swallowed it greedily, his eyes already closing in anticipation of the dulling haze. You remained by his side, watching as the powerful medicine began its work. His agitated breathing slowly deepened, becoming more regular. The tension in his jaw slackened, and the muscles in his face softened. The angry flush on his cheeks subsided, replaced by a pale, almost ethereal pallor. His restless movements ceased, and his immense body settled into the bed, a still, heavy presence. The sounds of the palace began to fade as darkness descended. The distant clang of a gate, the muffled shouts of guards, the occasional peal of a bell marking the hour. You heard the quiet crackle of the fire in the hearth, its flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. You listened to the king's breathing, now a steady, profound snore, a testament to the depth of his drugged sleep. You made your final observations in your notebook. King suffered greatly throughout day. Pain severe, temper volatile, opium administered, now sleeps deeply. You replaced the cap on your inkwell, the faint scent of gall nuts lingering in the air. You eventually retired to your own chambers, the weariness settling into your bones with a profound ache. You replenished the embers in your brazier, allowing a faint warmth to permeate the chill of your room. You undressed slowly, each movement deliberate, your mind still replaying the day's events. The king's suffering, his volatile moods, the relentless stench of his wounds, all formed a tapestry of grim reality that clung to your consciousness. You slid into your bed, the scratchy straw rustling beneath you. You pulled the coarse wool blanket up to your chin, but the cold seemed to penetrate your very marrow. Your body ached, your mind was exhausted, yet sleep remained elusive. You stared into the absolute darkness of your chamber, the silence broken only by the distant, muffled sounds of the sleeping palace and the slow, heavy beat of your own heart. You thought of the fragility of life, even that of a king. Henry, The once mighty, athletic monarch, reduced to this, a bloated, diseased man tormented by constant pain. You felt a wave of profound melancholy wash over you, a quiet despair for the suffering man you were sworn to serve. You knew that each day brought him closer to his inevitable end, and with it, brought you closer to the moment when your ultimate duty, to ease his passage, would be called upon. You closed your eyes, willing sleep to come, but the images persisted. The raw, weeping wound, the king's contorted face, the sickly sweet smell of decay. You drifted into a restless, shallow doze, your dreams a fragmented mosaic of pain, duty, and the looming shadow of mortality. You wake with a start. The air in your chambers is thick and still, the kind of stillness that precedes a great shift. The brazier has long since died down, and the cold of the early morning permeates every fiber of your being. You shiver, a deep, pervasive chill that seems to emanate from your very bones. There is no sound from the palace outside, a silence more profound than usual, a heavy, expectant quiet. You sit up slowly, your body protesting with aches and stiffness. Your mouth is dry, parched, and a metallic taste lingers on your tongue. The darkness is absolute, a dense, suffocating blanket that presses down on your eyes. You run a hand over your face, feeling the rough stubble, the grime, the undeniable weariness etched into your skin. Your mind immediately turns to the king. Was the silence a good sign, indicating a peaceful, prolonged sleep? Or was it something else, something far more ominous? The uncertainty gnaws at you, a cold, persistent dread. You rise from the bed, your bare feet meeting the cold oak floor with a soft thud. You move towards the window, fumbling for the heavy tapestry. You pull it aside, revealing a pane of glass, dark and reflecting only your own pale, anxious face. Beyond, the sky is still a uniform, inky black, no hint of dawn yet. The cold night air, damp and biting, seeps through the cracks in the casement, making you shiver again. You try to light the brazier again, but the embers are cold, dead. You curse under your breath. You'll have to wait for a chamberlain to bring fresh coals. The chill, however, is a minor concern compared to the growing anxiety in your chest. You move to your desk, fumbling for your small, well-worn medical almanac. You leaf through its pages, the rustling of the parchment a soft whisper in the quiet room. You pause at sections dealing with dropsy, with ulcers, with fevers, with the decline of the vital spirits. The words offer little comfort, merely descriptions of the inevitable. You find yourself pacing, a habit formed during your long vigils by the king's bedside. 4 steps to the window, turn. 4 steps to the door, turn. The rhythm is a small comfort, a way to channel your nervous energy. You listen intently, straining your ears for any sound from the palace beyond your chambers. The faintest creak of a distant door, the muffled tread of a guard changing watch, the distant howl of a dog. Each sound is magnified in the oppressive quiet, each one analyzed for any hint of distress or unusual activity. The air in your room feels heavy, stale, carrying the lingering scent of your own breath, the mustiness of old books, the faint odor of medicinal herbs. You long for a breath of fresh, crisp air, for a glimpse of the open sky. But such simple desires are a luxury here, in this labyrinthine palace, forever enclosed by thick stone walls and the dictates of your duty. You think of the past few days, the escalating severity of the king's symptoms. The renewed chest pain, the terrible vomiting, the constant, gnawing agony in his legs. His fevers, though fluctuating, always returned, stubbornly clinging to him. His strength was clearly waning, his voice weaker, his movements slower, more labored. You knew, with the chilling certainty of a physician who has witnessed countless such declines, that the king was approaching his end. How long, you wondered? A week? A month? Days? The unpredictability was agonizing. A new sound breaks the silence, faint at first, then growing steadily louder. The unmistakable sound of hurried footsteps in the corridor outside your chambers. Not the slow, measured tread of a guard, but a rapid, urgent scurry. Your heart leaps into your throat. This is it, the urgent, frantic rapping at your door again. This time, it's not a young page, but a deeper, more strained voice. Master Butts, quickly. The king, he is worse. Come at once. You grab your medical bag, your hand trembling slightly as you secure the clasp. You pull on your physician's robes, the heavy fabric feeling like a leaden shroud. You rush to the door, pulling it open. A distraught chamberlain stands there, his face pale with terror, his eyes wide and bloodshot. He is visibly shaking. Master Butts. He stirs with great pain. His breathing, it is terrible. Lead the way. You command, your voice sharp with urgency. You follow him, almost running, down the long, cold corridors. The palace is truly awake now, lights flickering in distant windows, hushed whispers from behind closed doors. The air of urgency is electric, a terrifying hum that vibrates through the very stones. You burst into the king's antechamber. It is not just the privy councillors now, but a small crowd of senior courtiers, their faces etched with fear and grave concern. They turn as you enter, their eyes fixed on you, their expressions pleading, despairing. No one speaks, but their silence screams the gravity of the situation. The door to the king's privy chamber stands ajar, and from within issues a sound that freezes your blood. It is a desperate, gurgling gasp, a choking, rattling sound that speaks of profound respiratory distress. This is the sound of a man drowning in his own body. You rush through the doorway, your heart pounding. The chamber is a scene of quiet, desperate chaos. The air is thick, stifling, and the smell of sickness is overwhelming. The king's immense body is heaving on the bed, his head thrashing from side to side. His face is a terrible purplish hue, his lips blue, his eyes bulging. Froth, mixed with blood, bubbles from his mouth. His breaths are shallow, agonizing gasps, each one a desperate struggle for air, accompanied by a terrible, wet gurgle. He is clutching his chest, his knuckles white, his nails digging into the velvet bedclothes. Your Majesty, you cry, rushing to his side. You throw yourself onto the bed, leaning over him. His skin is cold, clammy to the touch, yet his body is racked with internal heat. His pulse is a frantic, skipping beat, barely discernible beneath your fingertips. He awoke thus, Master Butts, a chamberlain whispers, his voice trembling. A fit of coughing, and then this choking. You know, with a terrible certainty, what this is. Pulmonary edema. His heart is failing, unable to pump the fluids from his lungs, which are now filling with fluid, drowning him slowly. This is the final, agonizing stage of dropsy, a consequence of his long-standing heart failure and the relentless pressure on his weakened vessels. You immediately call for the strongest cordials, for hot bricks to be placed at his feet to draw the blood away from his chest. You bark orders, your voice sharp and urgent, cutting through the desperate whispers of the chamberlains. Quickly, fetch the purging powders. We must attempt to clear his lungs. You try to elevate his head further, propping him up with more pillows, hoping to ease his breathing, but his immense weight makes the task difficult. He gasps for air, his throat rattling with each shallow breath. His eyes, wide and terrified, fix on you, pleading for relief, for air. You mix a powerful purgative, a combination of senna and scammony, with a small amount of warm wine. You hold it to his lips. He gags, trying to resist, but you force it gently down his throat. He swallows with a terrible, choking sound. You know it will be slow to act, and he needs immediate relief. You decide on a desperate measure. You call for the lancet, for the bleeding bowl. You must try to relieve the pressure on his heart, to draw the blood away from his engorged lungs. This is a last resort, a desperate attempt to buy him a few more precious moments of breath. With trembling hands, you quickly prepare. You tie a tourniquet around his arm, exposing the engorged veins. Your lancet, cold and sharp, glints in the flickering light of the candles. The king is barely conscious now, his struggles weakening, his gasps becoming fainter. You make the incision. The blood, dark and thick, gushes into the bowl. You watch it, intently, desperately. You allow a generous amount to flow, hoping, praying, that it will bring some measure of ease to his tortured lungs. You stem the flow when his breathing seems to lighten, infinitesimally, a momentary easing of the terrible gurgle. You apply hot cloths to his chest, hoping to draw out the humours. You rub his feet, trying to stimulate the circulation, to warm his rapidly cooling extremities. You hold his hand, feeling the rapid, fading flutter of his pulse. His skin is growing colder, clammy and waxen. The silence in the chamber is absolute, broken only by the king's agonizing gasps and the frantic movements of the chamberlains. Every eye is on you, on the king, waiting, hoping, despairing. The air is thick with unspoken fear, with the terrifying knowledge that England is on the precipice. His breathing becomes shallower, more infrequent. The gurgling sound in his throat lessens, but his chest hardly moves. His eyes, though still open, are unfocused, glazed. A single tear, perhaps of pain, perhaps of resignation, rolls slowly down his bloated cheek. You lean closer, your ear almost touching his lips. You hear a faint, almost inaudible sigh, a final, shuddering gasp, and then, silence. His body, immense and still, relaxes onto the pillows. The last, faint tremor leaves his limbs. His eyes remain open, staring blankly upwards. The purplish hue of his face slowly begins to fade, replaced by a profound, chilling pallor. You press your fingers to his wrist one last time. There is nothing, no pulse. The last faint beat has stilled. You place your hand over his mouth and nose, waiting. No breath, no whisper of life. The king, Henry VIII, is dead. You slowly withdraw your hand, the terrible truth settling over you with an immense, crushing weight. The silence in the chamber is absolute, profound. The chamberlains, who had been holding their breath, now let out a collective, soft gasp. Their faces are a mixture of shock, grief, and terror. You close his eyes, gently, reverently, with your thumb and forefinger. His eyelids are surprisingly light, yielding. You then straighten his limbs, pulling the blankets up to his chin, covering his immense, now lifeless form. You turn to face the assembled courtiers and chamberlains. Your voice, though a whisper, carries clearly in the sudden, echoing silence. His Majesty is departed. The words hang in the air, heavy with consequence. A collective sob breaks from the chamberlains. The courtiers, their faces pale, their eyes wide with disbelief, begin to murmur amongst themselves, a hushed, terrified rustle of sound. You stand there for a moment longer, a silent witness to the end of an era. The weight of your duty is momentarily lifted, replaced by a profound, almost dizzying sense of emptiness. The king, whom you had attended for so many years, whose pain you had tried to alleviate, whose moods you had navigated, is gone. The sun, you realize, has not yet risen. He died in the darkest hour, just before dawn. Your mind, though still reeling from the immediate shock, immediately turns to the practicalities, the immense responsibilities that now fall upon you and the other physicians, and upon the Privy Council. The body of the king cannot simply lie here. The news must be controlled, managed, delivered with utmost care to prevent panic or political instability. The succession must be secured. Young Edward, now King Edward VI, must be informed. You turn to Sir William Paget, the king's principal secretary, who stands closest to you, his face a mask of shock. Sir William, you say, your voice low but steady. The king is dead. We must secure the Privy Chamber. No one is to enter or leave without your express command. We must send word to the council. And to the young prince. Paget nods, his eyes still wide, but a flicker of his characteristic shrewdness returning. He immediately begins to issue orders in a low, urgent voice, his commands precise and authoritative. The machinery of the state, momentarily stalled by the king's death, begins to grind back into motion. You step back from the bed, your gaze lingering on the king's still, covered form. He is finally at peace. The pain that had tormented him for so long, the diseases that had ravaged his body, the burdens of his immense crown, all are gone. You feel a strange mixture of relief, grief, and profound exhaustion. The air in the chamber, though still heavy, seems to have lost its oppressive weight. The stench of sickness, while still present, no longer feels as suffocating. You move slowly towards the brazier, its embers now completely cold. You feel a profound, bone-deep chill that no fire can warm. Your mind is numb, yet intensely aware of the enormity of the moment. The king, Henry VIII, the formidable monarch, is no more. And you, his physician, have witnessed his last breath. You find yourself staring at your hands. These hands, which have probed his wounds, held his pulse, administered his medicines, closed his eyes. They are trembling, slightly, a delayed reaction to the immense stress and the profound event you have just witnessed. You clench them into fists, then relax them, trying to regain control. The first rays of the true dawn, a faint, rosy glow, begin to filter through the cracks in the heavy curtains. The new day has arrived, a day that will see a new king on the throne of England. But for you, Master Butts, the transition is far from simple. You stand in the presence of death, a profound and final ending, and the beginning of an uncertain future. The silence in the room is broken only by the hushed whispers of the courtiers and the distant, muffled sounds of the palace awakening to a world forever changed. The long vigil is over, but the work has just begun. You begin to move with purpose, a strange, almost automatic clarity descending upon you amidst the shock. Your first task is to formalize the declaration of death. You consult with Sir William Paget and the Lord Great Master, Sir William Herbert, who are already conferring in hushed, urgent tones. You present your findings, detailing the king's final moments, the symptoms that led to his demise, the severe dropsy, the pulmonary congestion, the evident failure of the heart. Your voice is steady, professional, masking the tumult within you. The decision is made to keep the king's death a secret for a few days. This is a matter of statecraft, to ensure a smooth transition of power to the young Prince Edward, now King Edward VI, and to preempt any potential political instability or foreign opportunism. It is a grim, solemn masquerade. You are tasked with the initial preparations of the king's body. This is a private, somber duty, one of the most intimate and humbling aspects of your profession. You dismiss all but a few trusted chamberlains, those whose loyalty is beyond question, whose discretion is assured. The great bedchamber, moments ago a scene of frantic despair, becomes a place of hushed, reverent action. You direct the chamberlains to bring fresh, clean sheets, fine linen, and a large basin of warm, scented water. The air, though still holding the faint, lingering scent of sickness, is now gradually being cleared by fresh air brought in through cautiously opened casements. You carefully pull back the heavy blankets, revealing the king's massive, lifeless form. He is even larger in death, a colossal monument of flesh. His limbs are stiffening, the first signs of rigor mortis setting in. His face, though calmer than in his final agonies, retains a bloated, pale cast, and his lips are still slightly parted. You notice the deep indentations in his skin, remnants of the laces from his various garments and the prolonged pressure of the bed. You instruct the chamberlains to gently lift and position the body. It is a difficult task, given his immense weight, and takes several men. You begin the process of washing him. You take a soft linen cloth, dipped in the warm, perfumed water, and carefully, meticulously, cleanse his skin. You start with his face, wiping away the remaining traces of froth and sweat. His skin feels cold, waxy, and unyielding beneath your touch. You close his eyes again, ensuring they remain shut. You wash his hands, once so powerful, now still and lifeless, their fingers slightly curled. You tend to his arms, his shoulders, his immense chest and abdomen. The process is slow, intimate, a final act of service to the monarch you have served for so many years. You work in silence, your mind focused entirely on the task, blocking out the profound significance of what you are doing. It is simply a body now, a vessel that once held a king, now emptied of its spirit. When you reach his legs, the task becomes more challenging and more poignant. You carefully unwrap the bandages from his right shin. The ulcer, that constant torment of his last years, lies exposed. In death, it looks less angry, less inflamed, but still a gaping, festering wound, a stark testament to the chronic suffering that plagued his final days. The pus is still present, thick and yellowish, congealed in the wound. You carefully wash the ulcer, using fresh, warm water, gently clearing away the putrid discharge. The stench, though no longer directly emanating from his living body, still rises faintly from the wound itself. You apply a fresh, clean linen dressing over it, a final, futile act of care. You tend to the smaller ulcers on his left leg in the same manner, cleaning and bandaging them with quiet precision. Once his entire body is cleansed, the chamberlains assist you in dressing him in a clean, fine linen shirt. The fabric, soft and white, contrasts starkly with the mottled, diseased skin beneath. You then cover him with a clean, unblemished sheet, drawing it up to his chin. The king's body lies now, a silent, majestic figure beneath the white shroud, in the great bed that had been his final battlefield. You then direct the immediate sealing of the privy chamber. All doors are locked from the outside, the keys placed under the immediate control of Sir William Paget. Only a select few, including yourself and the most trusted chamberlains, are allowed access. The pretense must be maintained. The king is merely indisposed, too ill to receive visitors, but still alive. It is a carefully constructed deception, designed to allow the Privy Council time to consolidate power around the new king. You then turn your attention to the written word. You retrieve your medical notebook, the one where you meticulously recorded every symptom, every dose, every observation. You spend the next few hours in a smaller, adjoining antechamber, carefully compiling a comprehensive report of the king's final illness and the precise moment of his death. You write in a clear, precise hand, detailing the progression of his dropsy, the heart failure, the pulmonary congestion, the state of his legs. This document will be critical, a historical record, a medical testament to the end of a momentous reign. You feel the weight of history on your shoulders as you meticulously pen each word. The quill scratches softly on the parchment, the only sound in the quiet room apart from your own shallow breathing. You are exhausted, profoundly so. The strain of the last few days, culminating in the king's death, has drained you both physically and emotionally. Yet, there is no time for rest, no time for grief. The demands of your station, the needs of the nascent reign of Edward VI, press upon you relentlessly. Around noon, Sir William Paget returns, his face still grave but now with a renewed sense of purpose. "Master Butts," he says, his voice low, "the council has met. Measures are in place. Young Edward has been informed. The proclamation of King Henry's death will be made in 3 days' time." You nod, understanding the political necessity of the delay. These 3 days will be a tense, secretive period for the court. The news of the king's death, when it breaks, will send shockwaves across England and beyond. Your role in these intervening days is crucial. You must maintain the illusion that the king is still alive, albeit gravely ill. This means a continuation of the routines, however grim. Meals must still be delivered to the Privy Chamber, though they will go untouched. The chamberlains must still perform their duties, their faces carefully schooled to betray no hint of the truth. You, as the king's physician, must remain visible, attending the Privy Chamber at the usual hours, consulting with other physicians, discussing his progress in hushed, somber tones. It is a macabre performance, played out for the benefit of the court and the stability of the realm. You feel a profound sense of emptiness now that the immediate urgency of the king's survival is gone. The constant vigilance, the relentless battle against his decay, had consumed your days and haunted your nights. Now, that struggle is over, and a strange void remains. You find yourself listening for his characteristic groan, for his booming voice, for the sounds of his restless turning in bed, only to be met by the profound, chilling silence that now emanates from the sealed chamber. The hours of that first day after his death stretch into an agonizing eternity. You hold private consultations with other trusted physicians, discussing the official pronouncements, agreeing on the narrative of the king's decline. You speak in measured tones, using the language of medical science, carefully omitting the grim details of his final agonies. You eat sparingly, your appetite dulled by the events. The food tastes like ash in your mouth. Your mind is still racing, even as your body aches with fatigue. You think of the young King Edward, barely 9 years old, now burdened with a crown far too heavy for his slender shoulders. You pray for his health, for his wisdom, for his reign to be long and prosperous. As evening descends, the palace once again settles into its nocturnal rhythm. The silence, however, feels different now. It is no longer the quiet of a sleeping court, but the heavy, expectant hush that surrounds a great secret. You retire to your chambers, the cold of the night more pronounced than ever. You do not light your brazier. The cold is a fitting companion to the grim reality that has unfolded. You lie in your bed, staring into the absolute darkness. Sleep refuses to come. Your mind is a whirlwind of images. The king's dying gasp, his eyes staring blankly, the silence that followed. The scent of decay, though now fainter, seems to cling to your very clothing, a constant phantom reminder. You think of all the lives touched by Henry, all the history he shaped, and how it all culminated in this quiet, solitary death in his bed. You close your eyes, willing yourself to rest, but your body is tense, wired. The weight of the secret, the gravity of the change, presses down on you. You try to remember a time before his illness consumed him, a time when Henry was truly the magnificent, athletic king, vibrant and full of life. But the image is fading, replaced by the reality of his bloated, diseased final form. You feel a profound sadness, a personal grief for the man you served, despite his temper, despite his cruelty, despite the burdens he placed upon you. He was your king, and now he is gone. The first full day after the king's death, January 29, 1547, passes in a strange, somber blur. You maintain the pretense with meticulous care. You arrive at the king's privy chamber at the usual hour, carrying your medical bag, exchanging hushed words with the guards and the few privy councillors present. The doors remain locked, the illusion of the gravely ill, but living, king carefully maintained. You spend a significant portion of the morning within the sealed chamber, ostensibly attending to his majesty, but in reality, observing the initial changes in the body and ensuring the continued integrity of the secret. The chamberlains are grim-faced, moving with quiet solemnity. The king's body lies undisturbed beneath the sheet, a silent monument to his own passing. The air in the room is stale, and the lingering odor of sickness is still present, though it has lessened somewhat since the initial cleansing. You periodically check for any signs of decomposition, knowing that the secret cannot be kept indefinitely, especially with a body of such immense size. The cold of the English winter, however, is your ally in this grim task, slowing the inevitable. You then attend the other physicians of the court, maintaining the fiction of the king's progress. You discuss his symptoms in vague terms, emphasizing the severity of his dropsy and the weakness of his vital spirits, hinting at his continued struggle without actually revealing his demise. You nod gravely at their commiserations, their expressions of concern. It is a taxing performance, each word carefully chosen, each gesture precisely measured, to ensure no suspicion is aroused among the wider court. The palace feels different, though. A subtle shift in the atmosphere. The usual boisterousness of the courtiers is subdued. The laughter is quieter, the conversations hushed. Some, perhaps, sense the gravity of the situation, the unnatural quiet that emanates from the king's apartments. Others might merely attribute it to his continued severe illness. You observe their faces, searching for any hint of suspicion, but find none. Fear, you realize, often blinds men to the obvious. You attend a privy council meeting, held in a small, private chamber, its windows heavily draped. The atmosphere is tense, thick with political maneuvering and the quiet anticipation of the official announcement. Sir William Paget presides, his face unreadable, but his commands are sharp, decisive. Discussions revolve around the precise wording of the proclamation of the king's death, the arrangements for the young King Edward's formal accession, and the swift consolidation of power by the newly formed Regency Council. You sit quietly, a silent observer, your role now shifting from the king's personal physician to a witness of history in the making. The weight of the secret presses down on every man in the room. The afternoon passes in a similar vein. More consultations, more carefully worded exchanges, more quiet observation of the court's uneasy calm. You return to the king's chamber periodically, ensuring that the body remains undisturbed, and that the illusion is maintained. The silence within those walls is profound, broken only by your own quiet breathing and the occasional rustle of the fabric as you adjust the sheet. As evening approaches, the physical and emotional exhaustion begins to set in once more. Your head aches, a dull throb behind your eyes. Your body feels heavy, your movements sluggish. You manage to eat a small, unappetizing meal in your chambers, finding little solace in the food. You retire early, but sleep is again a fitful, shallow affair. The silence of the night feels oppressive, filled with the unspoken knowledge of the king's death. You hear the distant sounds of the palace, the shuffling of guards, the creaking of timbers, each sound magnified in the quiet. You find yourself replaying the king's last moments, the desperate gasps, the terrible gurgle, the final, shuddering sigh. The image is burned into your mind, a permanent scar on your memory. You think of the funeral arrangements that will soon be made, the elaborate ceremonies that will attend the burial of a king. The pomp and circumstance, the solemn prayers, the grand procession, all for a man whose last days were consumed by suffering, by the relentless decay of his body. It seems a stark contrast, the public majesty versus the private agony you witnessed. You feel a profound sense of the brevity of life, even for the most powerful of men. The king, who commanded an empire, whose will shape the very fabric of England, is now a lifeless form, soon to be entombed in the earth. It is a humbling, sobering realization. You drift in and out of a restless sleep, haunted by the images of death and the weight of the secret you carry. The second full day after the king's death, January 30th, 1547, unfolds with the same somber, secretive rhythm. The pretense remains, rigidly enforced by the Privy Council. You, as the king's physician, play your part meticulously, attending the sealed privy chamber at the usual hours, maintaining the illusion of a gravely ill monarch. The guards at the outer doors maintain their vigilant, unreadable postures, allowing only the most trusted access. Within the king's chamber, the air is thick and still. The stench, though slightly less overpowering than on the first day, still lingers, a faint, sickly sweet tang that adheres to the heavy velvet drapes and the rich tapestries. The cold of the deep winter continues to aid in the preservation of the immense body, but you are acutely aware that time is a relentless enemy in this grim charade. You perform a discreet inspection of the king's body. The pallor of his skin has deepened to a waxy, almost translucent white. The rigor mortis has set in fully, his limbs stiff and unyielding. The sheer scale of his frame, even in death, remains impressive, a testament to the man he once was. You notice a slight discoloration beginning to appear on his lower back and other dependent areas, the first faint signs of postmortem lividity, as the blood settles in the capillaries. You make a mental note, a quiet acknowledgement of the inevitable processes of nature. The ulcerated leg, once a source of such agony and a focus of your constant care, is now merely a silent, putrefying wound, its odor a little more pronounced. You ensure the bandages are still neatly in place, a final, futile gesture of dignity. Your public duties continue to involve maintaining the delicate deception. You attend court, offering vague, non-committal answers to discreet inquiries about the king's health. You speak in hushed tones about his continued weakness, the lingering fever, the challenges of his dropsy. You avoid direct eye contact with those who seem too inquisitive, subtly deflecting their questions with professional medical jargon. It is a draining performance, requiring constant vigilance and a steely resolve. You observe the courtiers. The atmosphere is tense, hushed, a tangible sense of unease pervading the grand halls of Hampton Court. Whispers circulate like shadows. Rumors of the king's imminent demise, speculation about the succession, anxieties about the future of the realm. You hear snippets of conversation, discreet inquiries about young Prince Edward, veiled discussions about the various factions jostling for influence around the new, child king. You realize that while the court may not know the exact truth, they sense the monumental shift occurring. The air is thick with anticipation and thinly veiled apprehension. You attend another Privy Council meeting. The discussions are more urgent now, the plans for the proclamation of death and the accession of Edward VI being finalized. The date for the announcement has been set, January 31st. Tomorrow, a sense of grim determination settles over the council members. Logistics are discussed. The route for the king's body to be moved to Whitehall, the proclamation ceremonies in London, the summoning of key nobles to pledge allegiance to the new king. You listen, a silent witness, recognizing the intricate dance of power that unfolds even in the shadow of death. Throughout the day, you make careful rounds of the king's chamber, ensuring the fire is kept low, that the air is circulated, that no unauthorized person approaches the sealed doors. The silence in the chamber is absolute, broken only by your own soft footsteps. You find yourself pausing often, looking at the silent, shrouded form on the bed. You remember moments from years past, the king's vibrant youth, his boisterous laughter, his intellectual curiosity, his terrible rages. All are now part of the past, mere echoes in the vast stillness of this room. You notice the shift in the smells within the chamber. While the heavy scent of decay has not yet fully asserted itself, there is a subtle change, a deeper, more pungent undertone beneath the lingering medicinal odors. It is the unmistakable herald of profound change, the irreversible process of returning to dust. You know that the secret cannot be held for much longer. The impending announcement is not merely a political necessity, it is a practical one. As evening descends, and the palace once again settles into its nocturnal rhythm, the silence feels heavier, more expectant than ever. Tomorrow, the truth will be revealed. Tomorrow, England will learn its king is dead. You retire to your chambers, the exhaustion a dull ache in your bones. You do not light your brazier, allowing the cold to envelop you. Sleep is a fleeting visitor, constantly chased away by the tumultuous thoughts in your mind. The image of the king's body, lying so still, so irrevocably changed, is burned into your consciousness. The weight of the secret, the burden of history, presses down upon you. You lie in the darkness, listening to the muffled sounds of the sleeping palace. You imagine the young King Edward, perhaps already awake, perhaps restless in his own bed, unaware of the public ceremony that awaits him tomorrow, the profound change that will alter his life, and the life of the nation, forever. You pray for England, for its new king, and for the soul of the departed monarch. The hours before dawn stretch into an agonizing eternity, filled with the quiet dread and solemn anticipation of the monumental day to come. The day of revelation arrives. January 31st, 1547. You wake before dawn, not to a summons, but to an inner tremor of anticipation. The air in your chambers feels colder, crisper, as if even the atmosphere of Hampton Court senses the momentous shift about to occur. You rise, your movements slow and deliberate, a profound weariness clinging to your limbs. Today, the world will know. You dress in your finest, most somber physician's robes, the heavy black wool a visual representation of the gravity of the day. You check your medical bag, though you know your primary duties today will be formal, ceremonial, rather than medical. The instruments within feel strangely heavy, almost inert, now that their primary purpose, the king's care is concluded. You proceed to the king's privy chamber. The usual guard is present, his face grim. The atmosphere in the antechamber is different. Not quite hushed, but charged with a low hum of activity. Privy councillors move with a new sense of urgency, their faces set in determined lines. You offer a silent nod to Sir William Paget, who acknowledges you with a weary but resolute gaze. The door to the king's actual bedchamber, which has remained locked and sealed for 2 days, is now opened. You step inside. The air is cold, stale, and the lingering scent of decay is more pronounced now, though still subtle, carefully controlled by the winter chill. The king's body lies on the bed, still shrouded in the clean linen sheet, a silent, imposing figure. The formal preparations for the body's eventual transportation begin. A team of embalmers and master surgeons arrive, their faces grimly professional. Their task is gruesome but necessary, to prepare the king's body for its long journey and for the lying in state. You oversee this initial process, advising on the delicate matters of handling the body, the nature of his wounds, and the precise techniques for preservation. The embalmers begin their work. They are skilled, their movements efficient and practiced. The process is lengthy, meticulous, and profoundly unsettling. The removal of the king's internal organs is necessary to prevent further decay. You witness the procedure, a grim tableau of medical necessity. The organs, once the lifeblood of a king, are placed in a leaden casket, to be buried separately. The body cavity is then filled with various aromatic spices and substances: myrrh, frankincense, aloe, and often a mixture of sawdust and salt, all designed to aid in preservation and to combat the inevitable odors of putrefaction. The smell of these spices, pungent and exotic, begins to mingle with and slowly overpower the lingering stench of death. As the embalming proceeds, the king's leg wounds are meticulously cleaned and treated for final presentation. The main ulcer is carefully packed with more fragrant spices and then wrapped tightly in clean linen, a final act of dignity for the once tormented limb. His face is subtly prepared, his jaw often tied to prevent it from dropping, his eyes ensuring to remain closed. It is a macabre art, transforming the grim reality of death into a more presentable, if solemn, image for the public. This process takes many hours, a silent, grim ritual of the dead. You remain present throughout, overseeing, advising, your physician's knowledge crucial to the task. The physical reality of the king's passing becomes even more pronounced as his body is transformed from the soft, decaying flesh of life to the hardened, preserved form of death. Meanwhile, outside the sealed chamber, the court is abuzz. The whispers have given way to open speculation, then to hushed certainty. The news, though not yet officially proclaimed, seems to spread through the very stones of the palace. By mid-morning, a palpable tension hangs in the air, a mixture of awe, grief, and excitement for the new reign. Around 11 o'clock, the official proclamation of death is made. It is a solemn, dramatic affair. You are not present for the public declaration, your duty keeping you with the king's body, but you can imagine it. The heralds, dressed in their finest livery, standing before the assembled court, their voices ringing out across the courtyard. The king is dead, long live the king. The words, ancient and powerful, mark the official end of one reign and the beginning of another. A collective gasp, perhaps a few scattered cries of grief, followed by the cries of, "God save King Edward." The world outside your grim chamber now knows the truth. News of the proclamation quickly reaches the privy chamber, carried by a messenger. A profound quiet descends upon the room. The work of embalming continues, but a new solemnity, a new weight enters the air. The king is no longer merely indisposed, he is officially, irrevocably, gone. You feel a profound sense of the closing of a chapter. The intense, personal burden of his daily suffering is now transferred to the broader, public sphere of mourning and succession. Your immediate medical duties to him are over. Now, your role shifts to the ceremonial, the historical. The embalming is completed in the early afternoon. The king's body, now wrapped in swaths of fine cerecloth, then covered in layers of linen, is ready for its journey. It is placed in a magnificent leaden coffin, sealed by master coopers, then encased in a wooden outer coffin, covered in black velvet and adorned with golden symbols of royalty. The hammering of the nails, sealing the coffin, is a jarring, final sound in the solemn chamber. Each hammer blow echoes the finality of death. The coffin is then moved with great reverence to the presence chamber, a larger, more public room at Hampton Court, where it will lie in state for a few days, allowing selected courtiers and dignitaries to pay their respects. You follow the coffin, a silent participant in the solemn procession. The sheer weight of the coffin, carried by a dozen strong men, underscores the king's physical immensity, even in death. The presence chamber is transformed into a hall of mourning. Black drapes cover the walls and windows, absorbing the light and casting the room in a perpetual twilight. Candles, hundreds of them, flicker softly, illuminating the magnificent coffin, which rests on a velvet-draped catafalque. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax and the faint, lingering aroma of the embalming spices. You stand among the other physicians, a formal group clad in black, observing the solemn ritual. Courtiers, their faces etched with a mixture of grief and curiosity, file past the coffin, some kneeling, some bowing their heads. You see tears on some faces, genuine sorrow for the passing of a king who, despite his faults, commanded their respect and loyalty. Others, you suspect, are merely performing the necessary ritual of mourning, their thoughts already turning to the new reign, to the opportunities that might arise. You remain in the presence chamber for much of the remainder of the day, a silent witness to the public's first formal acknowledgement of the king's death. The atmosphere is heavy, solemn, a strange blend of ritualized grief and barely contained anticipation. You find yourself reflecting on the king's life, his impact on England, the religious and political upheavals he orchestrated. His reign was a whirlwind of change, a tempest that reshaped the nation. And now, the tempest has stilled. As night falls, the crowds of courtiers thin. Only a few trusted guards and a rotation of gentlemen remain with the coffin, keeping vigil through the night. You, too, remain for a time, watching the flickering candlelight, listening to the profound silence that now surrounds the king's earthly remains. The scent of beeswax and spices is now dominant, a strange, almost sweet perfume of death. You finally retire to your chambers, the exhaustion a bone-deep weariness that penetrates every fiber of your being. You do not light your brazier, the chill of the unheated room a fitting companion to the solemnity of the day. You undress slowly, each movement deliberate, your mind heavy with the images of the embalming, the sealed coffin, the hushed whispers of the court. You slide into your bed, the scratchy straw rustling beneath you. You pull the coarse wool blanket up to your chin, but the cold seems to seep into your very marrow. Your body aches, your mind is exhausted, yet sleep remains elusive. You stare into the absolute darkness of your chamber, the silence broken only by your own shallow breathing and the distant, muffled sounds of the palace. You think of the young King Edward, now bearing the full weight of the crown. You pray for his health, for his wisdom, for his reign to be long and prosperous. The transition of power, though carefully managed, is a delicate thing, fraught with peril. You know that your loyalty, and your medical knowledge, will now be transferred to the new monarch. You close your eyes, willing sleep to come, but your mind continues to replay the day's momentous events. The quiet dignity of death, the elaborate rituals of state, the profound shift in England's destiny. You drift into a restless, shallow doze, haunted by the lingering scent of spices and the enduring image of the black-draped coffin. The funeral procession of King Henry VIII begins several days later, not from Hampton Court, but from Whitehall Palace in London. The body had been moved there with utmost secrecy and solemnity on February 10th, shrouded under darkness to avoid any public spectacle before the grand state funeral could be arranged. Your duties during these intervening days were to remain at Whitehall, ensuring the security of the king's remains, and assisting with the meticulous planning of the procession and burial. The embalmed body, now safely ensconced within its lead and wooden coffins, rested on a richly adorned bier in the presence chamber, surrounded by flickering candles and guarded day and night. The scent of spices and beeswax was thick in the air, a constant reminder of the dead monarch. The day of the funeral, February 16, 1547, dawns cold and gray. A typical English winter day, with a damp chill that penetrates your robes. You rise before the sun, the air in your chambers at Whitehall thick with anticipation. Today, the great King Henry VIII, who shaped England irrevocably, will be laid to rest. You dress in your heaviest black mourning robes, the fabric heavy and somber. You arrive at Whitehall's Great Hall, which has been transformed. Black drapes hang from every wall and window, absorbing all light, plunging the vast space into a somber twilight. The air is heavy with the scent of countless candles, their flames flickering, casting long, dancing shadows. In the center of the hall rests the king's body, now encased in an even grander coffin, covered in rich cloth of gold and crimson velvet, adorned with the royal arms and a magnificent crown resting atop it. It sits on a towering catafalque, draped in black, surrounded by a forest of burning tapers. The sheer scale of the display is overwhelming, a testament to the might of the monarch, even in death. You take your assigned place among the other physicians of the court, a somber line of black-clad figures. The hall slowly fills with mourners. The young King Edward VI, barely a boy, his face pale and solemn, surrounded by his newly appointed Council of Regency. The Queen Dowager, Catherine Parr, her face veiled, her grief palpable. Princess Mary and Princess Elizabeth, their expressions carefully composed. Then come the nobles, the bishops, the knights, the lesser gentry, a vast multitude, all dressed in deepest mourning, their faces reflecting a complex mix of grief, fear, and calculation. The silence in the hall is profound, broken only by the crackle of the candles and the occasional muffled sob. The procession begins. The heavy coffin is carefully lifted from the catafalque by 16 strong yeomen of the guard, their faces strained with effort under the immense weight. The sight of the king's mortal remains, so grandly presented, being borne aloft, is a powerful and poignant image. You fall into place behind the immediate mourners and high-ranking clergy, part of the solemn cortege. The procession moves slowly, deliberately, through the great gates of Whitehall and out into the cobbled streets of London. The air outside is bitterly cold, and a fine, persistent drizzle begins to fall, adding to the somber atmosphere. Despite the early hour and the chilling weather, the streets are thronged with people. Thousands upon thousands line the route, packed shoulder to shoulder, stretching as far as the eye can see. Their faces are a mixture of expressions. awe at the sheer grandeur of the display, sorrow for the passing of their king, curiosity, and perhaps a touch of fear for the uncertain future. You hear the muffled cries of grief from some, the quiet murmurs from others. The sound of so many footsteps on the wet cobblestones, combined with the low hum of the crowd, creates a strange, pervasive drone that accompanies the procession. The route is long, stretching for miles, from Whitehall through the heart of London, past Ludgate, past St. Paul's Cathedral, towards the final resting place at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. The pace is excruciatingly slow, a deliberate crawl designed to maximize the public display of mourning and reverence. Each step is heavy, each breath sending a plume of mist into the cold air. As you walk, your boots squelching softly on the wet cobblestones, you observe the details around you. The streets are draped in black cloth, signifying a city in mourning. Banners bearing the king's arms hang limply in the damp air. The sound of muffled drums beats a slow, mournful rhythm, a constant companion to the procession. The bells of London's churches, usually so vibrant, toll slowly, solemnly, their deep chimes echoing through the gray morning. You see faces in the crowd, some tear-streaked, some impassive, some simply watching with wide-eyed wonder. You think of the lives of these common people, how profoundly their existence was shaped by the will of the man now lying in the coffin before you. His decisions on religion, on foreign wars, on taxation, had impacted every single one of them. And now, he was gone. The cold seeps into your bones, a constant, gnawing chill. Your feet grow numb, then ache with the relentless, slow pace. The drizzle turns to a heavier, more persistent rain, soaking your robes, plastering your hair to your forehead. The weight of the world, of history, seems to press down on your shoulders. You recall the king's vibrant youth, his athletic prowess, the golden monarch who once rode through these very streets, strong and proud. The contrast with the man you attended in his final, agonizing year, his body ravaged by disease, is stark and profoundly melancholic. You remember his roaring temper, his sharp intellect, his desperate pleas for relief from the pain that consumed him. All of it, now encapsulated in that heavy, silent box before you. The hours crawl by. The procession pauses periodically, allowing the bearers to rest, allowing the dignitaries to compose themselves. At each stop, you hear the distant murmur of prayers, the chanting of dirges by the accompanying clergy. The air grows heavier, saturated with dampness, the scent of wet wool, and the lingering, faint aroma of the embalming spices that still emanate from the coffin. By late afternoon, the procession finally reaches its destination, Windsor. The gates of the castle open slowly, revealing the solemn grandeur of St. George's Chapel. The interior of the chapel is draped in black, illuminated by thousands of candles, creating an ethereal, almost otherworldly glow. The air inside is warmer, but thick with the scent of wax and incense. The coffin is carefully brought inside, its immense weight echoing through the hallowed space. It is placed on a magnificent velvet-draped bier in the choir of the chapel, surrounded by the highest-ranking clergy and the chief mourners. The solemn liturgy for the dead begins, chanted in Latin, the ancient words echoing through the vaulted ceiling. You take your place among the other physicians, watching the final ceremony. The sounds are profound. The rich voices of the choir, the resonant prayers of the archbishop, the solemn silence of the congregation. You feel a deep, pervasive weariness settling over you, a profound exhaustion that permeates your very soul. The long vigil, the grim duties, the immense historical weight of his death, it all culminates in this moment. As the ceremony progresses, the heavy coffin is slowly lowered into the vault beneath the chapel floor. The grinding of the ropes, the muffled thud as it settles into its final resting place beside his beloved Jane Seymour. These sounds are final, definitive. The King, Henry VIII, is now truly, irrevocably, at peace. His earthly remains interred. The service concludes. The mourners begin to file out, their faces solemn, their footsteps hushed. You remain for a while longer, watching the last of the candle flames flicker in the vast, quiet space. The scent of incense and beeswax now dominates, a sacred perfume that fills the air. You turn and slowly make your way out of the chapel, into the cold, damp evening. The rain has stopped, but the air is still heavy with moisture. The castle grounds are quiet, the crowds dispersed. The long journey, the immense responsibility, the endless anxiety, all are now at an end. You walk slowly back towards your chambers in the castle, your legs aching, your mind numb with fatigue. The events of the past few weeks, culminating in this final act, have taken a profound toll. You are Master Dr. William Butts, and you have attended a king to his grave. You reach your chambers, the small space feeling strangely empty without the constant hum of anticipation. You unrobe slowly, the heavy black fabric feeling like a shed skin. You slide into your bed, the straw mattress a welcome, if unyielding, comfort. The darkness of your room is absolute, but tonight, it feels different. It is not the oppressive, anxious darkness of the king's final days, nor the weighty silence of the secret. It is a quiet, profound darkness, a space for rest. You close your eyes. The image of the king, finally at peace, his body at rest, is the last thought that lingers. The scent of embalming spices, the toll of distant bells, the rhythmic beat of the funeral drum, all slowly fade, replaced by the deep, pervasive silence of profound sleep.